Hello. Just trying to fix my.
Hi,
Hello. How are you?
Hello.
I'm good. Can you see me?
I
Mhm.
can see you.
Good.
How's it going, everyone?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Giovanna on the call with us is Jessica. This is
I just
the new
Hello.
assistant. Did you guys already introduce each other? Good.
not yet, but it's nice to meet you, Jessica.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too.
So I I put two things in the chat that we're going to use today, just so that I can
Okay.
access them. But I'm not sure if anybody can see it unless like they come on. Is that usually how it works? I know in the past, like if I put something on earlier, they can't see it. Is that true or? Not sure.
I can see it.
I know, but you were already signed on. I feel like if they come on afterwards, they can't see it. So either way, I will redo it, but like me putting it on, it just makes it easier for me to find it when I have to.
Yeah.
I believe, let me see. My computer.
Jessica, there's going to be a setting that you have to change. Like on the chat bubble, there's 3 little bubbles, allows everyone to chat with everyone. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Everyone. Okay.
You got to make sure that that feature is turned on. Yeah. That way they can see everything and chat back and forth and add those questions.
Okay. Awesome.
So I'm going to have like a pretty, hopefully a pretty interactive training today. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of questions. So Jessica, are you going to be on the whole time?
Yep.
So I'm going to ask for a little help. If there's a lot of silence, if you don't mind like jumping in and saying something, that sometimes gets like, you know, people a little bit more open to saying something.
Of course.
I've had to do this in the past with like other trainings I've done, and it's usually like my co-host or something like that. Like we would have the conversation and then eventually people feel more comfortable answering. So if you just hear silence, if you don't mind just jumping in, it's simple questions like, what do you think self-care is or something like that? And there's no real wrong or right answers, but it's to you. And then I kind of define it, or I'll say something else. But for this, I'm going to have people at the end. If we have enough time, we should have enough time to do their own self-care plan. And I'm going to guide them through the self-care plan. So there's stuff that like is pretty like easy to fill out, and I'm going to have them fill that out. And then there's more reflective, which we'll skip over, but I'll invite them to do it afterwards. But at least at the end, they'll have like a pretty complete self-care plan. And we'll have some conversations around the self-care plan too, like things that might have stuck out to you or anything like that. And then they get to do it's a professional quality of life, and it measures burnout, it measures vicarious trauma, and then compassion satisfaction. So there's compassion fatigue, and it's kind of the opposite of it. And it's a really interesting one. It's something people should do regularly. It's kind of like taking your pulse, like, how are you doing today? And you can do it like once a week, once a month. Supervisors can do it. The only thing I don't suggest is like, I will not ask people to share their results. So and I found an online version, which is perfect because the handwritten one, it was hard to compute like actual scores. So you get the scores right away. And then I put on my slide, it's like a little explanation for the scores, but they will also, like when you do it, you'll get an email on like your scores. But I'm going to guide everyone through like signing up for it as well, so that they can do it like in real time. And you don't have to like put any personal identifying information or anything like that. Like you can click off certain boxes. So I thought that was another thing, because this goes together with the whole presentation. Usually if I do it in person, I have these printouts that we do together, which takes a little bit longer because I have to guide them through the scoring. And this on-site one, it actually scores it for them like quickly. So it's worked out pretty good for like my other trainings. So hopefully it'll be fine for this.
Okay.
So
one thing, Jessica, just to add to this, the participants are not currently unmuted. So you have to open up the participant box, and there should be a little blue button that says allow to talk. So they'll then be muted at that point. But because it's in a webinar style, they automatically come in without the ability to speak. So you'll have somewhere around close to 100 participants. It looks like we already have 11 in the room because the webinar has been started and is live right now.
wow.
So if we just, you can start going through and actually allowing them to talk, right? And then the next thing that will pop up is Those are the only two changes we had to make, the chat, and then again, giving them the permission to talk, so.
Okay.
And did you find that option?
The allow panelists, no, that's panelists, no.
So at the top, there's a two tabs, panelists and then attendees.
Oh,
And so if you click on
attendees, okay.
attendees, yep, you'll see all of them, and then that little blue button.
So I gotta hit that for each one, okay.
Yeah,
You all can still see me, right? I just had to like shut, there's a shade, I mean, there's a window right in front of me and it's blinding me. So-
Yeah, you're good. Okay, so do I need to do that now for the allowed to talk for all of them, or?
I would, as people come in, because again, you'll probably see a pretty high attendance number in this one, so it's gonna take a minute to allow everybody on there, and you'll see them start.
So when they're
Popping
allowed
up.
to talk, they'll still be muted, but they can unmute themselves, or they will be, okay.
Yep,
That's good.
they can unmute themselves.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha. All right,
So the chat should be enabled for everyone at this point. And then we'll get the ability to speak so everybody can interact that way as well.
And I'm gonna share my screen so that I can pull this all up. Just let me know when you want to start, and I'm not sure if you guys usually want to start an introduction or anything.
Folks are coming in, so but
Good morning.
so remind.
good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, Giovanna, if you guys are gonna go ahead and get rolling because we are only a minute before the hour, and I know we always end up going right at time because there's so much great information for all of us to gain, and we have so many questions throughout the process. So starting just a little bit early, but as people come in, we're going to go ahead and give you the ability to talk like we did last time. Just make sure you remain muted until you are ready to speak and interact with Giovanna. This is part 3 of our trauma series, where we're going to be addressing and preventing burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue when working specifically in community action with some of our clients. So thank you all for joining us today. We will send out a recording and any other documents or information that we received during the call after the call, typically by the end of the week, if not early part of next week, to get all of that out to you so you have all of these resources. So thank you again for joining us. One other thing that I would like to do is introduce Jessica Petty to you all. She is the new Assistant Director of Professional Development here at ICA. We are very excited to have her on board, and she is going to be our host. So thank you and welcome, Jessica. And what a way to kind of throw you into it, right?
Right.
Jessica, I will allow you to take a moment, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself to the network real quick and tell them a little bit about yourself, and then we can hand things over to Giovanna.
All right. Well, like Stormy said, I'm Jessica. I just started as of yesterday, so really am getting thrown into the wolves here, but my background has been with community outreach, doing case management, things like that. And also I do have a background working with trauma as well. So I think this is a good fit for me to be thrown into helping you guys with this one. So I'm excited to learn about ICA and everything you guys have to offer, and ready to go.
Welcome.
Okay, well, thank you. Giovanna, I will hand things over to you, and good luck today, guys. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you, Stormy, and thank you, Jessica. I'm excited that you have an interest in trauma, because that is where my passion is. So welcome everyone to addressing and preventing burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue when working in community action. My name is Giovanna Jacoby. I'll give you a little background information about me. So my area of specialty is in trauma and PTSD. I run some trauma and PTSD research studies. I also teach a master's trauma course to counseling students. I also am a trauma consultant for all 4 state psychiatric hospitals here in New Jersey. And I also do some training and consultation at various organizations. So if you want to reach me or get more information, feel free to email me. So let's jump into our learning objectives. So we're going to define self-care and resiliency. We're going to recognize personal signs of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma or secondary traumatic stress. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. We're going to be doing that with a self-assessment. And we're going to discover ways to build self-compassion and resiliency. And we're also going to explore self-care options and create a self-care plan that I will guide you all through at the end. So let's jump in. Oops, sorry. So the first thing I usually want to emphasize when I start this training is, oftentimes we're going through a lot of stressors in our life. We're going through a lot of work stress, and people just preach, oh, it's just self-care. It's just about self-care. And for me, I don't want to minimize or ignore the real personal or work-related issues in your life by just being like, okay, just do self-care and you'll be fine. Self-care is like a coping tool, but it doesn't always change the current environment that might be causing the real issues or challenges. So this is just one component, is self-care. Also, resilience is often essential to our survival, but it doesn't mean we aren't suffering. Okay, so I just want to stress that before we jump into the presentation, because we are going to be talking about these things, but I'm not trying to minimize your real work challenges, your real personal challenges. But I always like to start off, with this. So my question to you all is what is self-care to you? What does self-care look like to you? How do you define self-care? I like to have really interactive, trainings. So there's no wrong or right answers. I will give you my definition afterwards, but like, what does self-care mean to you? Or how do you define self-care? You could either put it in the chat, and Jessica, if they do put it in the chat, if you can just mind the chat for me, that would be really helpful. Or you can, speak. Don't feel free to speak, because I like that interaction. So what is self-care?
This is Dawn. I think it's mostly taking time out to do something for yourself, even if that something is just meditating or sitting or reading a book, something that doesn't have anything to do with what you do for a living that makes you stressed.
Yeah, I love that definition. That's great. Yes, definitely taking time out for yourself. And it doesn't have to be very long, right? Sometimes it's a few seconds. I mean, well, I would say a few minutes for self-care sometimes. Thank you, Dawn. Who else? What is self-care?
Caitlin, she put putting yourself first, treating yourself. For me personally, I like to watch funny videos or movies.
Yeah.
Yes, Tara said, personally, making the time to read every day.
I love that. Yeah, reading, like to make that time for yourself, to create some time in your schedule for yourself. And yes, putting that time in for reading is a wonderful self-care tool. Anyone else?
This is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I think that one of the components of self-care is self-reflection and introspection, where we are actually taking a moment just to evaluate, where are we? Why do we think that we are where we are? Are we moving? What are some things that, just kind of reevaluating our positioning, and I guess reprioritizing what we intend to do, making sure that in there, as the other participants said, allowing or creating a space for our own selves. But I think some quiet time for reflection is
Yeah, I love
me.
that. I love everything you just said. And yes, taking some time to reflect on how you're doing. Oftentimes we have so many things going on around us, text messages, emails, phone alerts, we're on Zoom calls, all of this, and we don't really settle in with ourselves. So that was great that you brought that up. Anyone else?
In the chat, we have learn to say no.
Yes. I feel like everybody's watched my presentation already.
I know. Reading.
So much fun.
Reading books from diverse authors.
I love it. Yes.
Building yourself up so you have the support to help others.
Great.
Some more reading, walking, quiet time, music, healthy options that don't involve the source of stress. Walk in the sunshine, deep breaths, focus on a hobby, inspirational reading, and delegate.
Yeah, that's great. I love all of these options. Yeah. Maybe you don't need to. No, I'm joking. I was going to say, maybe you don't need to do this webinar.
In the webinar.
I'll give you guys a lot of more information, but these are wonderful options. So let me jump in. I love this infographic, because oftentimes people think that self-care is just like, indulging in like face masks, getting your nails done, bubble baths, shopping, a spa day. And it's what you all just said. Being able to say no, taking a break, also getting a full night's sleep, asking for what you need, setting boundaries. Also, if you need to go to therapy, like there's nothing wrong with that. Like this should be normalized. So it's kind of like indulging in pleasure versus truly taking care of yourself. And so real self-care is about taking care of your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical needs. So those are the areas that we will go through in your self-care plan. And I'll give you various ideas. Some of the ideas you all just said. So, and when do we do self-care? Just wondering, what do you guys think about when you do self-care?
Between phone calls?
I like that. Sometimes you need it, right? Between phone calls, definitely you need self-care. Anyone else? When do we do self-care? No? Okay. So
I think throughout the day.
I like that. Yes.
because we need to say no at times, and we need to ask for things throughout the day that we need. And then
Yes,
setting the boundaries, we definitely need to do that with clients and such.
you are correct. So oftentimes I hear people say, oh, I engage in self-care when I'm like really stressed out, or when I'm burnt out, or when I'm overwhelmed. And yeah, definitely you need to do it during those times, but self-care should be done every single day, and it should be kind of put into your schedule. Some of them should be scheduled, and then others is like you're reflecting and you're aware, oh yeah, like I'm starting to feel really stressed. Let me take from my list of something I can do. But it should be practiced every day. It should be part of your day, kind of like brushing your teeth. It should be part of your day. So it's not just when we're stressed out that we do self-care. We do self-care to prevent some of the stress from happening, or from overwhelming us, or to be able to cope in the moment, but we should do it every day. So I just wanted to stress that.
That's mainly what's in the chat as well. So whenever possible, being
Okay.
self-aware, when it's needed, ideally daily, daily basis. Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you for minding the chat. It's helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot coming in, so I'm trying to get to everyone,
Wonderful.
but
If there's anything else, let me know. And, I'm sure we have more than enough time. So anything else?
there was one quote that's in here. It says, "Can't make withdrawals from an empty bank account. Invest in yourself so you can give."
These are all great.
That came from Susan. Susan
Thank you,
Hands.
Like everybody has been so on point, and yeah, giving ideas. Also, when we're sharing our ideas, it also helps, because not everything that you're saying is captured in this webinar. So I love getting feedback, because you're also giving, the other participants some ideas. So I'm not going to ask you what burnout is. We're just going to define what is burnout. It's this state of physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion resulting from prolonged stress in the workplace. Okay. It involves feelings of cynicism, mistrust, and reduced personal accomplishment and motivation. Burnout can make you feel stuck and hopeless. And most people, kind of understand the concept of burnout. Stress is a response to threat. So there has to be a level of threat in your environment. I like this infographic, and it compared stress to burnout. Okay. So with stress, this infographic is saying you put in too much effort. With burnout, it says it's hard to put in any effort. So it's this prolonged stress. So this is why we talked a little bit about self-care. Is like, okay, so what can we do with this stress to prevent burnout? You feel emotions more strongly. And in burnout, your emotions feel blunted. With stress, you feel hyperactive and anxious. And with burnout, you feel drained and helpless. So you can see how stress can turn into something a lot more overwhelming. With stress, you have less energy. And with a burnout, interestingly, you have less motivation. And with stress, it takes a physical toll. And with burnout, it takes an emotional toll. So I thought it was just a great infographic, just to show the differences, because it is a stress response. I liked this quote. It says, burnout is an opportunity to reprioritize yourself. Because oftentimes we're not prioritizing ourselves when we're stressed, and it can lead to burnout. I also wanted to talk about compassion fatigue. So let's define what compassion fatigue is. It's the classic symptom is a decline in the ability to feel sympathy and empathy, and accordingly act from a place of compassion. So that's where the compassion comes from. You're not feeling compassionate towards the people that you're serving. So you're lacking that sympathy or empathy for them. It is the stress and fatigue resulting from the interactions and caregiving work with a client, okay? So we can see this with caseworkers, intake workers, community outreach specialists may be more susceptible to this given the high demand and stress they may encounter. When I first started my career, I started out as a caseworker for the Department of Children and Families, actually down in Florida. And I saw a lot in that entire field of compassion fatigue and burnout. And you know, it's something that wasn't really talked about. It's just like you keep going, you keep going. And when you keep going, sometimes you lose that empathy and sympathy for the people that we're serving. It results in an increase in stress, negative emotional reactions, and a blunted state of empathy. So we also feel these negative feelings, reduced ability to feel joy or to feel care for others. So we're seeing that compassion, you know, is like lacking. A lack of concern, interest, or enthusiasm. And unfortunately, it can have ethical and legal implications if left untreated. So if you're starting to feel that lack of concern, that lack of care for others, I can see where it can have these ethical and legal implications for the people that we serve, right? So if we're serving others with, and eventually we start to develop these compassion fatigue symptoms that are developing into like a lack of concern or a lack of care for others, of course, there's going to be ethical issues, and it could have also some legal implications if left untreated. And we're going to discuss all of these concepts more today. Also, the last concept is, what is secondary traumatic stress? Sometimes referred to as vicarious traumatization, okay? So it's the physical and emotional stress response to others' extreme or traumatic events. It's a state of tension and preoccupation with the stories and traumas of the people that you serve. So many of the people, you know, we serve have gone through some horrific, you know, events. And sometimes those events might take a toll on us. So like for me, when I was serving the kids in the foster care system as a case manager, I heard about their stories, and, you know, like it would at times at night, you know, I'd be like, oh my goodness, like, is this child okay? Or I can't believe that, you know, this happened. And so these are normal responses that we're feeling for people, right? Because we are actually having this compassionate response and this worry about our clients for some of them. So it can have a cumulative and long-lasting impact on workers' personal beliefs and worldview. And it has similar symptoms to post-traumatic stress disorder, and it can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. It can eventually lead to it. But if we could catch it early on through these, through this specific assessment, we might be able to mitigate the effects. So what contributes to burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary traumatic stress? Okay, so there's things that contribute to it. And it's usually in our work environment. So work conditions. So work conditions can definitely contribute to these things. So if you're not having enough staff, you have large caseloads, excessive paperwork, rigid work conditions, high employee turnover rates, you can see how these things could possibly contribute to these conditions. So also there's organizational issues that might contribute. So not addressing the pervasive issues of clients' trauma. So possibly, like, for example, homelessness, inadequate restorative supervision. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. Policies and culture that do not support trauma-informed care. So with trauma-informed care, part of trauma-informed care is actually also being trauma informed with the employees. So it's not just about clients, but it's also trauma informed care is also about preventing trauma with employees and creating work conditions that support the workers. And then the climate of the work environment. For example, is it unsupportive? So these things could relate, could contribute to burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary traumatic stress. Also, client issues. So if you're serving clients that might be chronically suicidal, might be in chronic crisis, they have multiple problems you're trying to handle, anger issues, chronic illnesses. These issues may impact you if you're dealing with clients on a one-to-one basis. Or even just in general, you have many clients that you're serving like this. Also, which is really important, and we're going to talk about social support today, because we all need it. But if you're working in isolation or you have inadequate social support, especially at work, this can definitely contribute to burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary traumatic stress. So we're going to talk about this later on in this training. And then also personal life issues can definitely contribute. So you're already stressed, at home, you're worrying about things at home, and then you come to work and you have all of these added burdens at work. That combination can also lead to burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary traumatic stress. I'm saying these things because we need to be aware of them. Because if we're not aware of them, then, we start to just blame ourselves. And, there's a combination of things that can lead to this. But there's hope. So I don't want to just say like, these are the problems and there's no hope. There's tons of hope. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to mitigate some of these problems. And the first thing you can do is there's an online assessment. We are not sharing this. We're not sharing your results or anything like that, but I want to invite you all to take this. And I'm going to walk you through it. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share the actual online assessment and I'll let you all get onto it. Can everyone see it in the chat? I had already put it in the chat, this link. If you can't, I'm going to try to escape this and put it in the chat again. And I will walk you all through it. So this site, you're going to answer some questions. There's choices in the site, so they're not going to store your data or anything like that unless you want them to store your data. We can't see your screen, and we're not sharing your score, but this is a great way to really understand it's going to measure compassion satisfaction, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, yes, I have it.
Oh, they're saying that they can't see it. I think you shared it to host and panelists, so.
Oh, okay.
Instead of to everyone.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, no
Second.
problem.
Okay,
There we go.
I just linked it again. Let me know if the link works.
It does.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful.
okay.
All right, so maybe you can minimize part of your screen so you can see me guiding you through it, just to the part of the actual questionnaire. But I want to just guide some of you through it. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so you're going to click yes. This is my first time completing the Pro QOL. So that's the professional quality of life. They call it the Pro QOL. And this is how you're going to measure these things. And then do you see where it says, please include my data in the Pro QOL set, or please delete? I would say please delete if you don't want your data stored. I usually always put please delete. Press next. Number of years you've worked with people in distress. I've probably worked with it probably at least 20. And then would like to receive the results by email. I usually put yes. If you put no, I believe you'll get it right away, but I usually put yes so that, I will have a copy of it. And then you press yes after you put your email in. The other thing I wanted to stress as you are filling this out, this is not something you fill out once and you're done. You can go in here and it's kind of like taking your pulse or taking your blood pressure. You're checking yourself. You can do this weekly, you can do this bi-weekly, you can do this monthly. If you're a supervisor, you can, do this as like part of supervision. I would not ask your staff about, their score unless they want to share it. It's just part of trauma-informed care. And then also, you can talk about, like what are other things you can do to prevent these things from happening, and mitigate some of the effects. And then this is it. So you want to really be honest because it's about yourself, right? So you're going to select the option that honestly reflects how frequently you experience these things in the last 30 days. And I believe there's 30 questions. So you literally would just say like, I am happy in the past 30 days, and then be honest with yourself. We can't see you. This is just for you. So I am happy. And then you're going to pick never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often. And I'm going to give everyone some time to fill this out. You get to 10 and you're going to click next, then the next one and the next one. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to fill it out. I believe there's 30 questions, so it's not going to take that long. But I want everybody to have an opportunity to actually get the score, get their own score. And then we'll talk briefly about the score, but you will all get your score, like the full score results, in either an email or at the end of this survey. I'm going to stop sharing right now. Allow everyone to fill this out. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Jessica, if you don't mind doing it, and then you'll give me like a time that I can jump back in for everyone.
I was just about to start doing it. So.
Okay. Awesome.
On the same page. We got a couple people in the chat saying they're done. So
Okay. Oh, great. We'll
they went through it quick.
We'll give people a couple of more like minutes. So if you're done with it, you should have gotten a score unless you sent it to email. It might be harder for you to get into the email, but I did put just briefly what your score means. This is not in depth, but it's on the screen right now. I should be sharing.
Nope, not yet.
I'm not sharing?
No, it's not on yet.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone see now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Jessica, just let me know when you're done, and then that will give me an average of everyone else.
Okay. I
Are
am
you all done?
done. It looks
Oh,
like
wonderful.
quite a few people are done, so.
Wonderful. Okay. So you will get like a full, more in-depth report. I, took the basics and actually cut it down a little bit more, but I wanted to talk about like, what does the score mean? So you should get a score for compassion satisfaction, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress. So your compassion satisfaction is about the pleasure you derive from being able to do your work well, okay? And if your score is in the higher range, you probably derive a good deal of professional satisfaction from your position. If your scores are below 23, you may either find problems with your job or there may be some other reason. For example, you might derive your satisfaction from activities other than your job, okay? So that's for compassion satisfaction. Then there's burnout. It's associated with feelings of hopelessness and difficulties in dealing with work or in doing your job effectively, or they can be associated with a very high workload or non-supportive work environment. We're going to talk about this, I think, right after I go through this. Higher scores on this scale mean that you are at higher risk of burnout. So if your score is below 23, this probably reflects positive feelings about your ability to be effective in your work. If you score above 41, you may wish to think about what at work makes you feel like you're not effective in your position. There's other things, but feel free to view your full in-depth assessment, after this, webinar. Then there's secondary traumatic stress. It is about your work-related secondary exposure to extremely stressful events. If you score above 41, you may want to take some time to think about what at work might be frightening to you, or if there is some other reason for the elevated score. The other thing that they say is, while higher scores do not mean that you have a problem, they are an indication that you might want to examine how you feel about your work and your work environment. And you might want to discuss this with your supervisor, a colleague, or even a healthcare professional. So let's jump into like, what can we do? So the first thing I want to start off with is like, how can supervisors better support staff? So if you are a supervisor attending this, I'm going to give you some ideas. If you're not a supervisor, you might want to, say, I attended this training and, they provided how can supervisors better support staff, and maybe share it with your supervisor if they're open to it. So engage in restorative or supportive supervision versus punitive. So if you have supervisions with your supervisor, oftentimes we usually get called in for like things that we did wrong. And that's not always helpful to staff. So there's things that we can do to be more supportive or even restorative to our staff. And I'm going to go through some of these things now, okay? The first thing that's really helpful is to prioritize assigned workers' tasks. Oftentimes, we're not aware of it as a supervisor, but we might be giving like task assignments to staff, and they might start piling up. And for staff, they get overwhelmed. They're like, oh my goodness, I have to get all of this done by today. And oftentimes that's not usually the case, right? So I always tell the worker and the supervisor to help your staff as you're giving assignments, saying like, okay, this is due by the end of today. This is due by tomorrow, and this can wait till the end of the week, or this can wait till next week. So really prioritizing, like going through, okay, these are the list of assignments, and maybe you can do this in supervision. So you call the person in, you see all of their tasks, and together you're saying, okay, this needs to be done by this date. This needs to be done by this date. This needs to be done by the end of the week. This needs to be done by the end of next week or the end of the month. That really helps to put less burden and less stress on your staff, because oftentimes they're thinking, I need to get this all done as soon as possible. And sometimes it's not always the case. So it gives the worker a little bit more of a sense of control and less stress. Regularly ask workers what management can do to better improve job performance and job satisfaction. That's helpful. Use self-care strategies with your staff. So if you're doing like some kind of like, supervision together, you have a work meeting together. We do this all the time in my job is, we'll start off our meeting with like a breathing exercise, some kind of stress relieving exercise, especially supervision meetings. And we've brought in aromatherapy, used progressive muscle relaxation script. We even just did like, getting to know your workers, like, simple questions, like what was your favorite candy as a child, or, something now. Just getting to know people on a more personal level is helpful for the work environment. Ensure and encourage staff to take their breaks and protect that time. I've seen a lot of workers, including me at times, that I would work through lunch, not take my break. And that causes stress. And oftentimes we feel like, oh, I should work through lunch. And that is not part of self-care, and it leads to burnout. So encouraging your staff to take their breaks and protecting that time is really helpful. Or maybe, like you ask them to do something and it's like maybe an hour before lunch and there's a lot to be done. Encouraging them to say, no, I want you to still take your break, even though I assigned this task to you. And even though it does need to get done, by today. Helping them to identify their personal signs of burnout and encouraging self-monitoring. I think someone said in the very beginning of this presentation, like really like self-reflecting. And this is part of it. We're gonna, at the end, I'm gonna give out a self-care plan. And the first thing on the self-care plan is identifying personal signs of burnout. Check in and ask if they need help before they begin to feel overwhelmed. Oftentimes, staff, like, different assignments get put on them. They start to get overwhelmed. And, sometimes they won't ask for help because they feel like they should be able to handle this. So when you're a supervisor, really just checking in and saying like, do you need help with anything? Guidance. The other thing is promote peer support. We need our coworkers' support. I know in my work environment, I have that support. I can go to my coworkers. And in other work environments, maybe it's not something that is regularly done. So supervisors, if you can promote peer support, that can prevent burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious traumatization. Validate workers' feelings and identify ways to address them. And then another thing that's really beneficial if you're working in a work like office environment is advocate for restorative break rooms. For example, soothing sound machines, music, aromatherapy, comfortable chairs, pillows, blankets, coffee or snacks. I know in our break room, they always have coffee for us. I wish they had the other things, but we have coffee, which is really great, and water. Self-care precautions at work. I wanted to give everyone some self-care precautions at work. And it's some things we've already talked about. So remember not to judge your feelings. Feeling stressed out, anxious, scared, depressed, and overwhelmed are completely normal human reactions. And it's telling us, we need to be aware of ourselves and like take that moment to figure out, okay, what do I need in this moment when I'm feeling this way? Not to try to push these feelings down, but to really try to say, okay, what do I need in this moment to maybe feel a little bit better? Maybe it's not going to make the feeling go away completely, but being aware of them and saying, okay, there's something I can do in this moment to just, feel a little bit less stressed out. Identify your personal signs of burnout. We're going to do that today. Schedule regular work breaks and try to get fresh air. That really helps. I know in our previous webinars, I talked about the sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm not going to go into details today, but the nervous system that we can like feel most calm in is the parasympathetic nervous system. I'll go in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. But to turn it on, to feel more calm, getting fresh air actually can turn it on. You can feel a little bit better by just going outside. So if you can't go outside in your work environment, but you have a window or there's windows in the building, like a break room or something like that, open a window and try to get some fresh air. If not, go for a quick walk. Even 5 minutes can help, or just standing outside can help. Ask supervisors to prioritize tasks. I already assigned that to the supervisors, but you can advocate for yourself and say, like, I have these 10 tasks right now. I can't do all of them at once today. Can you please help me to prioritize like what needs to be done today and what like other days can we assign the other tasks to? Ask for help before you begin to feel overwhelmed. Oftentimes, you know, we have all of these things going on at work and we just feel so overwhelmed that it makes us frozen, you know? So as you're starting to feel a little bit stressed, ask for help, ask for support. If it's a colleague, if it's a supervisor, even just prioritizing tasks can make you feel less overwhelmed. Lean on your coworkers and supervisors for support and guidance. So hopefully your organization can support you in leaning on coworkers. And, you know, this is something that we really need in the work environment. And also establish personal boundaries. So think about work boundaries. I do give several ideas for work boundaries in the personal self-care plan. I wanted to give you all like quick and immediate coping strategies you can do. And these are all activities and things that turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. I discussed this in I believe it was the 2 previous webinars, but I'll go over it quickly. So we have a control system in our bodies that help us to either manage stress or react to stressful things, okay? I'm trying to put this in simplistic terms right now. So we have something called the sympathetic nervous system. This sympathetic nervous system gets turned on when we're stressed out and see some kind of threat. So if it sees threat, it's not something cognitive that you get to control. If our bodies pick up threat, it turns on the sympathetic nervous system. This gets us ready to fight or flee, okay? And when that starts to happen, you're starting to feel stress in your body. Your heart is pounding. You might feel nauseous. You might feel really tense. When you're noticing these things in your body, your own tension, this is something that your body is giving you clues for. And there's quick and immediate coping strategies. Now, doing these things, it turns on the other system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our brake. So sympathetic is our gas pedal. Parasympathetic is our brake. The brake makes us feel cool, calm, and in control, okay? And so these activities actually turn them on. A great one in the moment that works, and this is a cool one, and everybody hears about it and they're like, oh, you know, I've heard about this. This doesn't work. It usually doesn't work because you're not doing it good. It's a breathing exercise, and I'm going to show you a quick breathing exercise that turns on your parasympathetic nervous system. You take a normal breath in and a long exhale out. Why does this work? I'm going to tell you why. Like, what's the physiological reasons why it works? So when you breathe in, your sympathetic nervous system turns on. This is standard for everyone. When you breathe out, your parasympathetic nervous system turns on. So it's your breath out that actually relaxes you, not the breath in. So when people tell me like, oh, the breathing exercises that I do don't work, it's usually because they're not doing it the correct way. And people are not taught this. So when you're taking a deep breath in, some people will say, oh, take a deep breath in, hold it, and then take a long breath out, right? Oftentimes you're focusing on that breath in, and the breath in is turning on the sympathetic nervous system. And then they say like, you know, just take a breath out. You have to have a longer breath out than the breath in. So think about people that are prone to panic attacks, people that might be prone to asthma attacks. if you ask these folks to take deep breaths in, you're actually priming them for more stress or for an asthma attack. Because if you think about it, do you see where the focus is on the breath in? So to make it simple, normal breath in, long exhale out. You can do this anywhere. You can do this at work. You can do this when you're walking, during a stressful event. Nobody's going to see it, you know, like you're just using your breath. So I just wanted to stress that one activity you can do to cope is something we do normally, every single day, you know, every minute of the day. So just focus on a long breath out, and it should start to calm you down a little bit. So normal inhale and long breath out. Like kind of like you're breathing through a straw, or you're, you know, blowing out birthday candles, like a long breath out. Okay. So I broke this down into relaxing activities, physical activities, and social support. Some of these things that I put on, like EFT tapping, I added an external link. So you can just Google it or use my external link. These are all things that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, even gum chewing. At the very end of this presentation, I support this with literature. So even gum chewing, I have literature on it that supports it. So I'm trying to think. Oh, guided imagery. You can Google guided imagery scripts, and there's scripts that you can do it. There's also these relaxation apps that incorporate some of these things. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Am I going too fast? Any questions about the breathing exercise I was teaching you all? We still have time. I was just checking to make sure we have time. Jessica, any questions in the chat?
Nope. We do have someone that said that they do the relaxation music in their office every day.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I find music to be very relaxing. I usually have playlists of like things that like pump me up, and then things that really relax me. I have a couple of playlists for that. Okay. So I wanted to also include for work, like there's soothing self-care items, and these things, it can calm your sympathetic nervous system. That's your gas pedal. It'll calm you down, that you can bring to work. Some of these things, so with soothing self-care items, some of the self-care items, what we're trying to target is our 5 senses. So targeting your 5 senses can help calm your sympathetic nervous system, because it's responding to threats in your environment. And these threats in your environment are often caused by our 5 senses. Okay, so we're hearing something, we're seeing something, we're hearing something. So all of these things are targeting your 5 senses. They're sensory tools. Okay, some are more expensive than others. So feel free to look through and seeing if you can target your 5 senses and have like, you know, something at work where, you know, you're targeting your 5 senses. I would say like that's the best way. And then I also wanted to go over practical self-care ideas when you're feeling stressed. So establishing a routine is really important to feel a little bit more in control of your day. Creating to-do lists and like checking them off. Oftentimes I would put it on my phone and in the notes, and I can literally check it off as I go through. Or, you know, you can put it on a piece of paper. Creating a social support network with people you trust, admire, and you find healing to you. Setting personal boundaries, like saying no. Striving not to be perfect. Perfection is not helpful. It creates more stress. Prioritizing things that are important to you. You're seeing this theme of prioritizing. I would prioritize by creating a list. Avoid things that cause you unneeded stress. So if social media, the news, things like that, get rid of it. Or only look at it at certain, you know, times of the week, not even the day, but, you know, during the week. Holding yourself accountable. So holding yourself accountable to self-care, you know, like making sure it's part of your daily routine. Also cleaning and organizing can feel like really refreshing. I know when I clean, I feel like I feel decluttered in my mind also, like I can think better. Creating budgets are also part of self-care. Online shopping versus going into the store. I love going to Target and being able to just pull up and they already like did my shopping for me. It's just very quick for me. And then also just setting up alerts on your telephone is really helpful because sometimes you're like, I have to remember this, I have to remember that, and you feel really stressed. And so for the important things, I always set alerts on my telephone. So those are practical self-care ideas. I also wanted to talk about self-compassion because that's really important. And I think it's part of self-care and also just healing from some of these things that might be stressful to us. So with defining self-compassion, I wanted to start out with, well, the definition. So self-compassion is the ability to notice our own suffering and to be moved by it, making us want to actively do something to alleviate our own suffering. Sometimes I talk about self-compassion and some people say, oh, that's just being selfish. No, you can't do for others unless you're taking care of yourself. And that starts with loving yourself and feeling compassion for yourself. I like this other infographic. It said, you're so hard on yourself. Take a moment, sit back, marvel at your life, at the grief that softened you, at the heartache that wizened you, at the suffering that strengthened you. Despite everything, you still grow. Be proud of this. So I hope to help you think about self-compassion and want to start developing it in yourself. Or if you already have self-compassion, further developing it. So for examining self-compassion, so Barnard and Curry, I made a little mistake. It's 2021. Self-compassion have 3 interrated elements that are exhibited during times of pain and failure. So these are the three things that this research provided. Number 1 is being kind and understanding towards yourself rather than judgment or criticism. Okay. So treat yourself like you would treat your best friend or a child, seeing your shortcomings as normal human experience rather than isolating in shame. And try not to ruminate on or ignore painful thoughts or feelings. Self-compassion acknowledges and supports the awareness and acceptance of painful thoughts, feelings, while still being connected to what's important to you in the present. Okay. We're not going to go over the self-compassion test or self-compassion guided practices and exercises, but these are things that I found when I was doing some research on self-compassion, and I thought they were, helpful. So I just wanted to put it in the presentation. And, you will get a copy of the presentation. So feel free, if you're more interested in developing self-compassion, there's a test and some guided practices and exercises. Jessica, is there anything in the chat or does anybody want to say anything over the past few slides? Just want to make sure that
nothing's come up on the chat yet.
So then I also wanted to talk about resiliency. And so what is resiliency? That's another important topic. And so it's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. So that's such as like family problems, relationship problems, workplace, financial stressors, serious health problems. And it's like the APA, they stress it's not just about your ability to bounce back, but also the opportunity for profound personal growth. So, I think developing resiliency is also important to healing from some of these conditions and preventing them. So as I'm doing the research for resiliency, I found an article by Cooper, Flint, Taylor, and Pern, 2013. And they found 4 elements of resiliency. So 1, resilient people are confident that they will succeed despite any setbacks that they experience. Another theme that we've been talking about is social support. So social support is about building positive relationships and creating allies who you can go to in order to help lower your stress levels and produce a more positive outcome. Third, they found adaptability, understanding your failures, reflecting on them, being open to new ideas and situations, and finding ways to complete difficult tasks rather than giving up. And then the last one is purposefulness. It implies that having a fixed and clear goal and always focusing on it no matter what setbacks you experience. And of course, you all are getting used to me. I found a resiliency quiz, which you guys can take. We're not going to go through that in this presentation, but I wanted to give you that opportunity if you were interested in resiliency. And just to go over, you know, as I'm looking through the literature on resiliency, I kind of summarized. So there's 4 ways to build resilience during difficult times. Number 1, practice self-care daily, not just when you need it. Number 2, practice self-compassion regularly. Okay. So, and these are some of the things to think about when you're practicing self-compassion regularly. Feel your feel your feelings and honor your emotions. Do not ignore them. So you don't want to push down your emotions. You don't want to push down your feelings. Really honor them. It's okay to grieve the losses in your life, you know, rather than, I know sometimes our society is like, just move on, you know. Sometimes we need that time to grieve the losses. You do not need to be perfect. Don't be afraid to fail. Forgive yourself for the mistakes you made or will make. Acknowledge and celebrate your successes. Sometimes we only focus on like what's wrong and what's going wrong in our life and what we need to fix. Sometimes we need to step back and acknowledge and celebrate your successes. So I invite you to really look about like what's, you know, successful in your life and really acknowledge them. And also positive self-talk. We really need to talk positively to ourselves. And so when you make a mistake, you know, you can say to yourself, you know, it's okay, I made a mistake. I learned blank from it. Like, what did you learn from it? So keep yourself motivated by self-talk. Because sometimes we have negative self-talk, those negative thoughts in our head, and you want to change them to more positive thoughts in our head, okay? Because that's what motivates us. The negative thoughts going on in our head, you know, can do the complete opposite. So really trying to change it to positive self-talk. Another one is nurturing, number 3 is nurturing a hopeful outlook. So this is also in regards to building resiliency during difficult times in your life or, you know, difficult work moments. So nurture a hopeful outlook. So accept change as part of life. Practice gratitude. Look for the positive things in your life. I've heard people that, you know, they wake up and they think about the positive, or they go to bed and think about the positive things that went on during the day. So gratitude actually has a healing effect on our body. Maintaining optimism that things will get better. We need that optimism, right? Because if you're just thinking like, my life is, you know, a mess, it's never going to get better, that doesn't really motivate you to get better, right? Or to, you know, to be hopeful. So maintain optimism that things will get better and work on that optimism. Reflect and shift your perspective with the changing times. We need to be flexible. And reconnect with your values. So really, you know, stepping back and reflecting on like, okay, so what are my values? Have I strayed away from them? And then again, acknowledge and celebrate the positive things that have resulted from the difficult times. Like what came out that's positive from the difficult times that you're currently in or that you've been in previously. Like search for it. And lastly, the theme is build your social support network. And sometimes it's hard to do, especially if you don't have a lot of social support, but I'm going to give you some ideas on how to maybe find more social support. Look for safe people you can tell your story to and express your fears, longings, and emotions that will support you unconditionally. So it can be a loved one, a partner, a therapist, a friend. You can find like support groups, a coach, spiritual leaders, a mentor. So really try to step back and see if there's any safe people in your life. Second, don't be afraid or feel shame in asking for help. I know that the society really values like independent people, but we all need help and support. So don't feel shamed to look for help. Surround yourself with supportive people. So know who your supportive people are, and try to find more supportive people. Lastly, you can find other support networks by doing extracurricular activities with like-minded people. So for example, like look at the things that you enjoy or things that you think you might enjoy. And this is, not an exhaustive list. These are some ideas. Yoga, pottery, arts and crafts, swimming, martial arts, wrestling, dance classes, exercise studios, theater. These are some examples, but really step back and say, like, is there anything I wanted to do or something like I did as a child that maybe I can do now? And I'll give you guys an example. So as a child, I was a ballet dancer. And I was like, like, what else can I do? And I found yoga as something that was really like, it fulfilled like a piece of my spirit. And I found so many like-minded people that I developed a relationship with that turned into really good, close friends of mine. So I invite you all to, find an extracurricular activity that you might enjoy, maybe something that you enjoyed as a child, as a teenager, or just as an adult. You're like, I always wanted to do this. Let me, figure out, how to make this happen. So like maybe, I don't know, like line dancing, something like that, so yeah, I'm just inviting you all to look for extracurricular activities to build your social support. So let's create this personalized self-care plan. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the self-care plan? Nothing? Jessica, anyone in the chat?
Nope, not so
Okay.
far.
So I'm gonna connect this self-care plan to everyone, and then we'll go through it together. I just put it in the chat, and I'm gonna share it as we go along together. Does everybody have access to it?
Yep.
Okay. Jessica, can you try it along with me just to make sure it's working and all of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like I was saying before, the first thing is really identifying your signs and symptoms of burnout and secondary traumatic stress. And this should be a fillable one. And we're not sharing anything. So I just want to, let you know this is safe for you to do. It's only for yourself. But the first thing, and feel free, if you know colleagues that might benefit from this, or if you're a supervisor, I invite you, you can share this plan with other people. I teach a trauma course to graduate students. I think I said this in the beginning. I make them do this the very first day. And probably within a few weeks, they're like, this was really helpful to me. This was really impactful to me. Like I never thought about like really creating a self-care plan, and I'm really using it, in my work life, my school balance. So I invite you all to just try this. And I wanted to do this with you because sometimes we don't make the time to do this during the day or after work. So I wanted to give you the opportunity during this webinar, and I'll guide you through it, and we can even talk about it. So these are some signs and symptoms of burnout and secondary traumatic stress. You can check the ones that apply to you. So it just literally, it's just check boxes, okay? And you can uncheck it if it wasn't something. So go through these and identify your signs and symptoms of burnout and secondary traumatic stress.
We do have one person in the chat that says they can't click the fillable form.
I wonder if maybe it's the computer. Jessica, can you click it on your end?
Yeah, I
Can
have
other
it pulled
people
up.
click it?
Someone else said that they had to save it in order to use it.
Okay, so maybe try saving it and then maybe you can use it.
That was going to be my response, that I had to download it to my computer before I was able to open it.
You had to
Okay,
download it.
great.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. So everyone just save it to your, your desktop, so it's workable. Lastly, what you can do for this identifying your signs and symptoms is I added something that, many of you probably know some of your signs and symptoms instead of just giving you ideas, but at the end you can, add other symptoms that you wish. You can put in the chat when you're done with this section. I'm going to give everyone maybe like another minute.
We're starting to get some dones in the chat.
Perfect. And feel free to continue working on it as I talk. Don't feel my pressure, but I do want to move some people along. I don't want to hold people up. And I also don't want to make people feel rushed. Okay, so this one is more about a reflection for yourself. We're not going to go through this part. I invite you after the webinar, maybe, you'll have some time to do this reflection. So the reflection questions are: start by asking yourself what energizes you, what drains you, how do I unwind and reconnect with myself, who are the people I go to for support, what do I have the power to change to start living a better life? So these are some reflection questions for you. If you do like, some like work meetings and you want like some questions, like this might be something that you can talk about, like what energizes me, and then, go around the room and have people talk about that. But, these are for you. So take some time to reflect on them. Okay. So the self-care ideas, I divided them into mind, body, and spirit. Okay. And then the next one is self-care ideas for work. So feel free to, click some that, you might want to try, or things you already do. So things you might want to try or things that you already do for mind, body, and spirit. And then if they're not captured on there, or something else that you want to do that's been on your mind, I have other. So as we're going through this, any of them stick out to you? Any of them surprising? Any thoughts or concerns about this?
I like the weighted blankets because that was something that was really great for me when I was younger. Made me feel real secure and comfortable.
Yeah. And just to give you the physiological effects, weighted blankets actually turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. So remember, that's our that's our break that makes us feel calm and in control and, cool, collected. When you have your parasympathetic nervous system turned on, you feel like you can think more clearly. Yeah, so weighted blankets are a great way to turn it on. Thank
Did
you for
not know that.
The other thing is, if you really like weighted blankets, then weighted lap pads are really great for work. You can bring it to work with you, and you can have a similar feeling. So the weighted blankets are really probably hard to carry around at work or even have it, but there's weighted lap pads. And I think there's weighted, something you can put on your shoulder also. I think there's weighted shoulder pads. So if you really enjoy weighted blankets, then I invite you to maybe bring those things, try them at work. It might be helpful. Okay.
In the chat, they like the know your own personal love language and use it on yourself.
Yeah. Anybody add things to this? Like things that you would use or you would add? Because you're giving ideas to everyone else, the other participants. Anyone want to share if they put something else under these categories? Anything in the chat, Jessica?
No, not so far.
Okay. So let's move on. I wanted to move on to, I gave you a bunch of self-care ideas for work. So things that you can do at work or maybe even bring to work. So yeah, it's both do at work and bring to work. And again, these are things that you might want to try or even things that you're already doing for self-care. I will tell you, the one that's be daring and speak up or advocate for yourself and your ideas with your boss or in the meeting. That was something I had to develop over, the past several years, is not to be quiet. And if you have something to share it, and that's part of self-care. Well, I like to believe it's part of self-care. So that's why I added that.
We do have one person done so far.
Thank you.
It'll still go off, you just can't sign it. Sorry.
That's okay.
So.
Anyone want to add to this list of something that they do at work?
It's been years, but it's been every Monday I have to turn it off.
Jessica, do you mind?
Thank you.
Got it. So in the chat, someone said, I always have dark chocolate in my desk.
Oh, that sounds so good.
That's what
I highly recommend that.
Started using NFC tags to automate checklists and reminders.
I didn't hear that one.
Using NFC tags to automate checklists and reminders.
Okay, so like some kind of automated like checklist and reminders. Yeah, that's really helpful at work. I had a colleague, I work, I walk into the colleague's office and she had a, like this device on her desk. And I'm like, what in the world is that? And she put it in her head. And I remember seeing them at the mall. And it was like a scalp massager. She's like, this feels so good. She's like, and I usually take breaks, like maybe, every couple of hours and just massage my scalp. And I thought that was genius. So I put that on there too. And other colleagues that use aromatherapy, so many different things. And then of course you could put other.
Try to decorate based on the season so that there's color in my office rather than the boring gray.
Yeah, and like you kind of, I see a lot of people do that at home, so you kind of bring that into the workplace. I like that. We spend a lot of hours in the workplace. So if you're working in a, office, yeah, I mean, definitely. I like that idea. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, so the next part is part one is you want to identify your work triggers in order to manage them. So what are work triggers so that you can start to manage them? Do we ever think about our work triggers? So maybe like a work trigger is, having, too many assignments at once could give a lot of stress to a person. Maybe having certain colleagues that are unsupportive, and like, what can we do about that? Maybe talking to your supervisor about that. So like, what are some work triggers in order to manage them? And I put 5 down, but like, you can put as many as you want, or as least as you want, but like, just sit back and think, reflect, like, what are my work triggers? And add to this list as you go along, in your work day, or in your work week. Like, oh, now I didn't put this down, but let me put this down. The other one is identify your personal triggers at home or in your personal life in order to manage them. Are there things at home that might be triggering to you, or even in your personal life, in order to manage them? So it is important to identify these things in order to manage them. Anyone want to share ideas, like general ideas that maybe everybody could relate to? Like maybe like too many phone calls can be a trigger, or being on the phone all the time, or no breaks in between Zoom calls, like having multiple meetings in a row could be a work trigger. And like, how do you manage that?
In the chat that we have are miscommunication with deadline and expectations attached.
Yeah, definitely.
Unknown expectations.
That's why it's helpful to go to your supervisor and say, okay, can we prioritize some of these things, and have more control over your schedule? But that's definitely a work trigger. Yeah.
When clients make decisions that set them back or sabotage their own progress.
Yeah, that could be triggering. And then stepping back and being like, okay, what's going on in this person's life? And knowing that, we really don't have control over our clients. It really is up to them. Like, stepping back and saying, okay, how do I support this person, even though like I can see, you know, where they, you know, failed or what they can have done better. But yeah, that I can see that as a work trigger.
Voicemails.
Lots of voicemails. Oh yeah.
Yes. Too much work and not enough workers.
Oh, yes, definitely. And you know, you getting the work of other people, that can definitely be a trigger.
Someone has one that's a work and a personal trigger. They used to have a walker and they'd get self-conscious and stressed about using that.
I can see that as stressful.
Mhm.
And normalizing, like we need to normalize these things. You know, we all need support and help, whether it be physical, emotional. Anything else people wanted to share that might be helpful to the group, you know?
She normalizes her walker by adding stickers.
Oh, I love
Like
it.
that.
Or decorating it. Yes.
Not
Yes.
being supplied
Yeah.
all the resources to be effective and productive.
Say that again, Jessica.
Not being supplied all the resources to be effective and
Yes.
productive.
That's a big trigger. I've had that so many times happen to me, so many times in my various roles. Okay, let's move on because we have 10 minutes. So I know that you guys all checked off the various self-care things that you would, you know, want to try or do. So I invite you to put them into this self-care plan. So things you want to do daily that you can do easily to feel less stressed. So daily things you can do to feel less stressed. And, you know, many of those ideas we already checked off. And then weekly are self-care ideas that you can do, that you can schedule like once, twice, or a few times a week. So for me, I usually schedule my yoga in weekly because I can't do it daily. I would love to do it daily, but I don't have the time to do it daily. So weekly would be like yoga for me. Daily is one which I enjoy, is taking my dog for a walk or playing with her. So that's part of my daily is, you know, interacting with my dog, playing with her daily. And then like monthly, getting together with friends monthly is helpful. Sometimes one friend a month, you know, maybe a few friends, but spread throughout the month. Biannual, you know, vacation is important to me. So being able to take a vacation and something I look forward to. And lastly, you want those work self-care ideas that help you to feel less stressed and more focused. And, you know, everything you just checked off. So you have everything on one page that you can easily like print out, you know, put it on your computer, whatever is helpful. But, you know, I find like writing it down and having it somewhere is really helpful. And then last section, we're not going to do this. I invite you to, after this presentation, maybe you'll have a little bit of time. Think about the personal boundaries you wish to uphold, work boundaries you wish to uphold. Then think about social supports, who you want to reach out to in your personal life, social supports at work. And then lastly, and most important, is to step back and think about like, how will I ensure I will hold myself accountable to all these things that I've identified in this self-care plan? because it doesn't work unless you actually hold yourself accountable to these things. Like, how are you going to do these things? Are you going to say, like, you're going to tell this to, you know, your personal, like your partner? Are you going to, you know, set reminders? Are you, you know, like various ways, like how are you going to personally hold yourself accountable to all of these things? So that's another thing that's like a self-reflection. So we have 5 more minutes. I wanted to just share my last slide. And you'll get these handouts. So just give me a second and I will get us on this last slide. Okay, so for handouts are on the right side. And then I also just, so that you didn't have to go through the entire presentation, I wanted to provide you with all of the links. So this was the professional quality of life. That was the actual assessment you took today. And then all of these other tests that I had throughout the presentation, I just put it all in one slide. Then this is the self-care plan you're going to get today. There's also a self-care assessment that some people found really helpful with more ideas. So I'm going to attach that today. There's also a handout on identifying social supports. So if you find that helpful, feel free to also, if you have clients and any of these things are helpful, feel free to share it with them. I have a list of self-care apps if that's something that's helpful for you. And then I created a sleep hygiene. So some folks really struggle with sleep. So I did some research and created like a sleep hygiene handout. Some of them do have supplements. So you need, before you do any supplements or anything like that, please talk to your medical doctor, because it can interact with like certain medications and things like that. And certain conditions and certain conditions and medications. So definitely check with your doctor, your medical provider, before you start any supplements, but they're just ideas. So they're just ideas that, you know, there's research on that could be helpful. So I just wanted to, you know, end this with any questions, concerns, feedback. And I'm also reachable through my email. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions or something comes up. So Jessica, I think I'm going to end it. We have 2 minutes. I just wanted to leave it for questions, but if there isn't any questions.
Someone did ask where they can find your email.
My email is right here.
Yep.
And I can probably also put it in the chat as well.
A lot of thank yous. Someone missed the other webinars and wants to know how to access them.
Okay. I think they were also taped, so maybe Stormy can help. But I'm hoping that you guys, you got something out of it. I always wanted to have something that's takeaways. So I hope that, you know, creating a plan and thinking about resiliency and self-compassion is something that, you know, you can take back with you. And then also just, you know, advocating for yourself in the workplace. So Kelly said the whole series is linked in the follow-up email if you missed the others. And it is a pleasure for me, and it's a passion for me to talk about these things, especially trauma and self-care. This is something that I've been doing for the past few years, especially when the pandemic started. We did a lot of self-care presentations, and it's connected to stress, which is connected to traumatic experiences. So.
All right. Looks like a lot of thank yous, and I think we addressed that one question. So All right. Well, thank you guys all for logging in. Thank you, Giovanna, for this wonderful presentation. Like we said, all of this has been recorded. All the handouts, the recording will be sent to you. So thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you. Jessica, I'll stay on for a minute if you need to speak to me or anything
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. I didn't want to go over time because I did want to show the sleep handout just to make sure. But
Mhm.
when you send out an email with the sleep one, if you can just reiterate, like they should talk to their doctor before.
Okay.
I've
Yeah.
never had any issues, but I always just stress it. Let me end this. Click exit. Why is this not working? I will share it with you really quickly.
Okay.
I just didn't like go over and then them not fully get it. So this is a sleep hygiene workout
Mhm.
worksheet. So these are some of the things that are like in the literature that help you with sleep.
Okay,
This
there's
right
the
here.
supplements. Yeah.
You see that?
Yep.
And I mean, dark tart cherries or fatty fish or walnuts, milk, bananas, oatmeal. I mean, these are basic stuff, right? Like I think it should be okay with that. Those things actually induce like melatonin in your body,
Oh,
which is really interesting. Yeah. Lavender oil, things like that. It just like lowers your it induces your parasympathetic nervous system. But like magnesium supplements, it is like these are really great, but you have to check it out with your doctor before you start it. It's just a supplement, but where most like a lot of people, they have low magnesium levels, and magnesium helps you to produce melatonin. So if you're low in magnesium, like it will help, but you should always talk with your doctor. And sleep teas. These sleep teas can be helpful too. But do you see where I put the disclaimer
yes.
with the
Yep.
little, so if you can just, if you're going to hand this out, like just make sure that, they have, this disclaimer.
Yes. Yeah. That's
And
important.
then they have like this little, if they wanted a sleep plan, I give them opportunity for a sleep plan.
Cool.
And they have like a whole hygiene workout worksheet that I created. So, and people have found it helpful, but I just, we didn't have enough time to go through all of that in detail. And I wanted to make sure people had, time to ask questions for the few minutes.
Yeah.
So anything concerning or questions for me or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think Stormy normally handles emailing out, or do you email out?
No, Stormy usually does.
Stormy does. That's what I thought. Okay.
What I'm going to do though is send you my presentation and all the attachments, and then you guys usually will take care of the rest.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, so nice to meet you.
Really nice to meet you. And I can't believe that you just started and you're trauma informed and all of that. What kind of trauma work have you done?
Mainly with kids. So like I worked, I have my LPC in Illinois. So and I worked with kids that had mainly it was like sexual abuse and things like that. So the heavy stuff.
Very heavy stuff. Yeah. I mean, I first started, like 20 years ago, I was a case manager with the foster care system, and we saw a lot of heartbreaking stuff. And sadly, like what I was finding was like oftentimes they weren't, addressing some of these things like with a therapist,
Yeah.
so especially the really young ones, they needed something like even like play therapy they have, and yeah.
Yep, and like the sand trays and all that.
Yes,
I did all
exactly.
that.
Yes, all of that.
Yeah.
Is helpful. Even just drawings, it'll come out in drawings, right?
Yep.
Very interesting. But yeah, so you did important work, and like welcome here.
I
Well, here,
know. I'm
not part of
excited
it,
to
but-
switch gears. So
Are you?
yeah. I've done case management and outreach for most of my career. So
Okay.
it's fun to like switch gears and be on kind of the other side of it now.
And there's a side of burnout in that, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
there's definitely a burnout side to that.
Yeah.
Especially with high cases that have a lot of, stressful things going on with the cases. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for supporting me through this. I know that I'm just like, can you mind the chat for me?
Oh,
It's just
all good.
presentation, and minding the chat is a little bit more like cumbersome. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
anyhow, so nice to meet you. And if you guys need anything from me regarding this presentation or even future presentations, just, you guys know my email. So
All right. Sounds good.
all right. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.